Hey YouTube, Stretchline Bait and Tackle here, and I want to go over a few things about upgrading your trailer. And I've got a project here where this trailer here I purchased along with that Big Fish 120, and it suited its needs for the big fish, but I also have two uh, Big Town PDL 120s, and I want to convert this over to hold two kayaks, which I'll do eventually. But today, what I want to go over is upgrading your wheels. Now, I've got a little bit of a bearing noise here. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but these are 8-inch rims. This is what came with it. Now, at 60 miles an hour, this 8-inch rim is turning about 2,500 RPMs. Versus I bought some 12-inch wheels. I got these at Harbor Freight, tire and wheel mounted together. And these 12-inch ones will run about 1,700, 1,800 RPMs versus 2,500 RPMs at 60 miles an hour. That higher speed with the load is increased heat and wear, and a lot of times these 8-inch wheels are referred to as bearing burners, and that's why, just because they're spinning so fast. So if you can upgrade to a larger wheel, it helps you if you're running up and down the highway a lot. All right, now what I'm going to do is I purchased new hubs. Now and I'm going to go back and cover one little thing here on the bolt pattern. To know which type of wheels to get is your bolt pattern here. This is a four lug rim. And most trailers are going to be 4 or 5 lug, and a lot of them, they're standard, pretty much standard sizes. But just to make sure, what you'll want to do is you want to measure from the center of one lug nut across to the center of the next lug nut, and that's going to give you your measurement for your hub, for your bolt pattern. Now, so when you go to buy a wheel, you can compare, like if this one's 5-inch or 5.5-inch, when you go down to get a 4 lug, you would know that you would need a 5.5-inch bolt pattern. So just measure your wheels, and then when you go to purchase one, you know, you measure between the same two, center to center, and you'll get the correct wheel. And most of them are pretty much standard, so, but it's always good to take them measurements along. So anyway, so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to cover, I purchased some new hubs, and what I did is I bought a hub kit from, I believe it was Amazon, and it came with the new hubs, bearings, seals, and the kit came with 2 size bearings. It came with a 1-inch bearing and a 1.5-inch bearing, and what that was for is to determine the axle shaft. I'll show you that here in a minute. And it's a dual kit, so it works on either one. A lot of your trailers are going to be able to 1 or 1.5. So anyway, let me get started on this. I'm going to pull this apart. This is real easy to do. It doesn't take much tools. As you can see right here, there's the tools I'm going to use to take this off and on. Basically a pair of slip joint pliers, a pair of diagonal cutters, or those are actually VAM pliers, which are really, really cool pliers if you get a chance to get some. A hammer, and you don't necessarily need one that big, and something to take the wheel off, which you could use a lug wrench or ratchet or anything that you have available. So okay, so I'm going to pull this, let me get you in a position here where you can see maybe. Alrighty, let me pull this wheel off here. Alright, now the old hub came with, had holes in it and took wheel studs, wheel bolts actually, where my new hub is actually has studs on it with regular lug nuts. So I will just, it doesn't matter as long as I've got the kit came with lug nuts and everything I needed. So with new caps, new seals, new bearings, and plus the lug nuts. So, all right, well, let me get this apart for you here. Now, first thing you want to do is you want to remove this outer cap, and a lot of times you can put a screwdriver in here and pry out carefully, or you can do a side to side with your hammer, and you don't have to get crazy with it. And you loosen it, and it's going to pull right off, just like that. Set that to the side. Now, when you pop this off, see, and this I'm showing you, this is going to work if you just want to clean and grease your bearings. Now, that is something you want to do, especially if your trailer's getting down in the water. You want to make sure that you are cleaning and changing the grease in there to get any contaminants out every so often, maybe once or twice a year. Okay, now you're going to have a cotter pin in here, and you want to straighten out the bottom, and then you grab it from the top, and you can just pull it right on out. And there's the old cotter pin. Now, you can reuse these, but these things are so cheap. I got a new one with the kit. I like to put new ones in there, so I'm going to put that off to the side. Now, if you can see inside here, there's a large nut right here. And that nut, it's not on there very tight. I'll show you as a matter of fact. I just take these tight. See, it's not taking any torque to get these off. I say that and I hit a little snag there. All right. But anyway, it just takes a good pair of slip joint pliers. You can get a axle nut socket that fits this, but a good pair of slip joint pliers will work just fine because it's not torqued. They're not heavily torqued at all. All right, you pull your nut off, and this is what's known as a castle nut. If you can see, it's got slots and notches through here, and so it kind of looks like a castle. It almost looks like the top of a rook on a chess piece. So, all right, you want to set that aside and save it. And then right behind it, you will have a washer. And you can just warm that right on out also as well. Clean this off for you. See, and it's just a regular flat washer. Now your hub will pull off, and when you do, your outer bearing's going to come out with it. And sometimes it may fall around, but it's okay. So, all right, now I've got the hub off. If you're just going to clean and grease your bearings, all you have to do is pull your bearings out, and there's a seal. There's a seal on this side. You can pry this out carefully, or you can take a punch against your bearing race carefully and lightly tap it. Don't get crazy with it and knock the seal out. They're not in that tight, and you'll have another bearing on the inside that'll come here, and then you can clean all the grease out. You want to get it all off that bearing race inside there, and all grease out of there and off the bearings before you clean and re-grease. So, and I don't know if I can show this to you. Maybe we can get a close-up, but this bearing race is pitted. There's pits all along this, and that is what was causing these bearings to grind. The pitting of the race where these rollers roll across, that's the surface that's in contact all the time. So at one time this had some trash, water, debris or something, or it could be just the load and the high speed of being turned at such a high RPM, and like I say, that's why they call these bearing burners. Now, this is your axle shaft right here. You want to clean your axle shaft off and inspect it, and I'll bring you up here a little closer here. Okay. So this is your axle shaft. This surface right here is where your seal rides, and that's what holds your grease in and keeps water and contaminants and debris from getting in. Now, this is the actual shaft itself, and your bearing, one bearing rides right here, the inner bearing, and the outer bearing rides right here. Of course, your washer and your nut go right here. You also have a hole on your axle shaft. You can see that right there. That's where the cotter pin goes through. It holds that castle nut on it, captures it. And the reason you have a cotter pin through that holding that nut is because it's not tightened too tight. And I'll show you when I go back together with this how we preload the bearings and a proper tightness to that. And then since it's not tight, the nut could just loosen and back off, and that's why the cotter key is through the hole there, and that's to hold that nut not on. So when you take this apart, you want to inspect your sealing surface here, and you can clean this with a little bit of sandpaper. You don't want to get crazy with it because you don't want to wear that surface down too much. And then inspect your shaft here and make sure everything's all right. You can even test drive a bearing. Well, if I grab the right bearing, 1 second. Okay. Yeah. And you can check and make sure that you have your right. Actually, that's the way the inner one rides, pointing in, taper in, and the outer one will go on this way in the hub, taper pointing in. So, all right, now I've got my shaft off and got it cleaned, and I've already cleaned and packed. I've already packed grease in the new hub right here and the new bearing. So what I want to do is I want to put the seal in. And what I do to put the seal in is I have my seal right here. Get some excess grease off of here. Is I just put that in, and I'll just take just a flat piece of wood, a piece of 2x4 or something like that, and just tap it in. Now you see the seal is in. It's flush with the surface, and here's my rubber sealing surface that will ride up here on this shaft. Okay, and I'd already pre-packed the bearing on this. You can see the inner race on this one, how clean and shiny it is. And then here's my bearing. Now, you want to pre-grease these bearings in that hub, and you want to make sure that you have plenty of grease in there. And so I use a high temp. This is high temp disc brake wheel bearing grease. You can also find marine grades that are more water resistant, but you want to make sure it's a high temp, and the water resistant helps also. Now this is the greasy nasty part, but let me show you how to pack these bearings by hand. They do make bearing greaser tool that you would put this in, and you basically push it down and it presses the grease through it, and they're about 30 bucks if you want to get one of those. And I just do it by hand. What I do is I just take some grease, clean grease, and I make my little pile here on my hand. Now what I'm going to do is, you can see this, I'm pinching off pieces and pushing it in. And I want to keep doing that and keep doing that. And you will see the grease starting to come through where I'm packing it inside that bearing. And when I see it starting to come through, I want to rotate to the next section here and do the same thing. And rotate again. And I'm just pressing this grease, pinching off and pressing it into the rollers little by little, piece by section here, until I see it start to come out the other end. And then you want to make sure you go all the way around with it. Make sure you got grease coming through all the way around. This is the old-fashioned way. This is the way we used to have to do it back in the 60s and 70s. Whenever you did a brake job, you had to do this pretty much every time you took your drums off, or you took your rotors off to be turned. Now you can see that grease is coming through right in through here. It's poking through. That means I've got the inside, I've got grease inside this bearing on the rollers. And you want to make sure that you don't skip this step if you want your bearings to last. because it not only keeps them lubricated, creates that surface there, but it'll help keep it from corrosion and help keep water and dirt out. So once I've got the bearing greased and I've got the grease all the way through it, I want to put grease on the inside of my hub here. You want to put a little extra in there, and you want to grease that inner race too. And see, so I have my bearing coated all on the outside, and I got my bearing in there. Now I'll clean off my excess. You can wear rubber gloves if you want. I've been doing this for 45 years, so it doesn't really bother me. But do clean off the excess on the outside here. And you see here, I've got a nice clean greased bearing inside there. I've made sure that my bearing is filled on the inside, and I've got some extra grease inside the hub. Now that you've got your bearings inside your hub and you've got your seal in, you got your bearing on the inside, and remember on this, your tapered side is going to point into the hub, such as, I don't know if you can see it, this is a tapered, what's called a tapered roller bearing, and you can see it's wider on the outside and thinner on the inside. It's got a little taper to it, and the way that rides is it rides with the taper in and turn it around on the other bearing, and the taper in on that side. You want the two smallest points pointing in. All right, now make sure you can see this here on the axle. There we go. Okay, now I want to carefully take my bearing and I'm going to slide it on this axle, and I want to push in until my seal has sealed in the back. We'll point you around here so you can see my seal has gone in. This is fully seated, so you want that fully seated. And then you will take your washer and put your washer on, and then your castle nut. And remember, your notches point outwards. And just screw this on. You can use, like I say, you can use an axle socket nut or slip joint pliers, whichever one you choose to use. So now when it comes to preloading, what I'll do is I will snug this down and rotate at the same time, and you'll feel it get tighter and it gets harder to turn. This is preloading. What I'm doing is I'm putting a load on those bearings and making sure everything is seated in together. Then I am going to unload it. I'll back the nut off, spin it around a few times. I like to spin while I'm doing this and preload again. I like to load it down again. Make sure everything's good and seated, and now I'm going to back it off. Okay, now when it comes time to tighten this down, you don't want to tighten this nut too tight. You don't want to put an impact on it. Don't put a big wrench on it. And that's why I've always used a pair of slip joint pliers. You can see how my nut is loose, and you want to take your nut and you can just snug it down with your hands, right? And make sure you don't have any side to side motion. And you've got that in there, okay? And you can snug this down just a little bit. You don't want to put too much tension. This is basically just the weight of the pliers on it. Now here is my hole. You see it's not quite lined up. So I can back this up just a little bit until my cotter pin slides through. That's why you tighten it up just a teeny bit and then back it off till your cotter pin fits in the hole here. Once your cotter pin is pulled through, then you can bend your tangs over. Pull one out this way And then on the inner one, if it's sticking out too far, I like to trim it off a bit and then push it in. That way I'm clearing my cap. Now, the kit that I bought came with new caps, and this is the ones that it came with. These plastic caps with a rubber deal you can put more grease in. Well, the ones that I had on this trailer are a taller one, and they have a grease cert built in. I don't know if you can see that right there. That is a grease cert where you can put a grease gun on. And these are really handy and nice so that when you have this all assembled later on, you can do a regular maintenance of just adding a few pumps of grease after every trip. And it will keep new clean grease in there. And if it's overfilled, it's going to push it out backwards past the seal. And you really don't want to push it out past the seal because you can weaken the seal. But you can add new grease every so often on regular maintenance. Then of course every 6 months or so, especially maybe more often if it's getting submerged. If you're putting your trailer wheels down in the loading ramp quite frequently, you may want to pull out and grease these. You know, I would say twice a year is usually good for me. But anyway, so you can pick these caps up. You can use these if you wish, but I like the convenience of these, and I like to carry a grease gun with me. And so basically, all I'm doing is putting this on, and then I tap all the way around until it seats. And then now I have my dust cap sealed, and give it a good spin. All right, it turns freely. I don't have any play. All right, now I'm going to put the new wheel on. And my lug nuts. And lug nuts, these are tapered also. For those of you, just in case you don't know, the tapered point, the narrow point, goes in. You want the flat side pointing out. And I am actually missing a lug nut, so I will have to make a run down to the parts store and pick one up. Since my old hub had bolts with it, it was a different design. A different size too. There we go. I like to just run them down. See, they're not really all that tight, and then I just kind of tighten in an alternative pattern, little by little. And I would have gone over here next had there been a nut. I'll come back. Alrighty, now give your tire a spin. Got no play. There we go. That's all it is. This is it's not difficult. It's easy to do. And upgrading to this 12-inch wheel versus the 8-inch, my RPMs are going to be down. I will not be spinning these things at 2,500 RPMs. They'll be running about 1,700 RPMs, which will help keep your bearings. Increase your bearing life. Now, what I am going to do is this old hub here, I am going to clean and grease this and pack these bearings with, and I've got the studs here, and I will put the old cotter pin and a cap all together here. Oh, got my bearing out. I will clean and grease this and put this all together. Now, granted, this is an old one with worn bearings. They haven't failed, but they are worn. But I will take this whole unit right here. I'll throw that in a plastic bag and seal it in a plastic bag. It's gonna be fresh, clean, greased, and I'll throw it in my parts deal for the trailer. So I like to carry an extra hub with me, where if I'm out down the road, because I'll do some trips, maybe a couple hundred miles. I live here in Texas, but sometimes going from tournament to tournament, lake to lake, a little bit of distance involved. So I like to carry a spare hub with me. So I'll have this hub complete. I'll have a spare tire and wheel with me, and I throw that in the back of the truck just in case, because I don't want to be stranded. You can always lose a wheel, lose a bearing, and you don't want to be stuck on the side of the road. And this is something you can do on the side of the road. It won't take you that long to throw a new hub on, should you have one start failing and you're out 100 miles from home. And this will get you home until you can get new hub and new bearings. Oh, alrighty. Well, this is just another. This is a how-to from Stretchline Bait and Tackle. I'm going to be covering more when I convert this over to a dual kayak trailer from a single. We'll do a video on that. And other than that, I think that's it for this lesson here. Just this trailer wheel maintenance. This is good thing to stay up on. You don't want to be stuck on the side of the road with a wheel come off. So anyway, so when you're out there on the water, make sure you wear your PFD. Stay safe out there. If you see some trash, pick it up. Pick up your trash, yak it out, and have a nice day. I'll see you out on the water.